Good morning YouTube, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to do the install on our rear A-arms from Super ATV. So before we get started, make sure if you guys do this at home, you have the correct tools and you use all your safety procedures. What I mean by that is know how to use the tools. We're going to be jacking this thing up. We're definitely going to use some jack stands. I know the jack has a lock on it, but let's just be safe. And also know your torque specs. So I went to the owner's manual again and I printed off an exploded view. It has all the different torque specs for these rear bolts. It also calls that any of the nuts that we use at the pivot points on the A-arms should be replaced. And that's per the OEM manual. It looks like the bolts can be reused, but the nuts need to be replaced. So let's go ahead, let's get this thing jacked up off the ground and let's get it together. Alright, so we got everything jacked up. We got the jack stands there, we got the jack up here, we got the wheels and tires off. I like to put any of the nuts back that I can, less likely to lose them. So here's how we're going to proceed. First, we're going to take the lower shock mount off. Then we're going to take the sway bar off each side. From there, we're going to do one side at a time. We'll end up taking this knuckle off here. We're going to leave the axle attached. And what we'll do is we'll support this because it's got your brake caliper on here. So we don't want to damage that. We'll go ahead, we'll put the top A-arm from the bottom. We'll have to remove this here for the brake line, your little mount. And then we're going to go ahead and tighten the top up, reinstall everything. But we're going to just slide the bolts through on the bottom. And the reason being is, remember, the camber adjustment. Don't forget, when we're putting this together, we're going to use grease liberal, really liberal. We want to make sure that everything is nice and greased up, well lubed. And if you look yesterday when I was talking, so you see right here, it just got these two tabs right here. The Super ATV comes all the way across, a little bit more protection. I think that's probably gonna be a little bit beefier on this top. And then I'll save the boxes. I'll put the A-arms back in the box in case there's ever an issue. We can't do the fronts today. The new ball joints haven't come in. So let's go ahead and start disassembly. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. These bottom right here are 14 millimeter. The uppers are 17 millimeter, and then the shock is also a 17 millimeter. So one thing you may need to do is jack up your lower A-arm just to get this bolt out. Sometimes they're a little tight. Right now, this one's sliding out real easy. So now we're going to take off the sway bar end link. So the sway bar end link is a 14 millimeter also. So if you look at the sway bar end link, there is like, it's a nut with a cap on it and then another nut behind there. You're supposed to take this outer nut off and then use a hex head to loosen the inner nut. And I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so as you can see, I took this off. It's a 14 millimeter. What you're going to do is you take your hex head, which is an M5, and you stick it in there. And then you're going to take your wrench, get it in there on top of it, and you're going to loosen it that way. So let me get that done. So that's how you do it. So you take your cap off and use your M5. And you basically hold that threaded bolt while you're taking this off. Again, this is a 14 millimeter. And then your sway bar end link basically just comes out like this. Let's see if you can see in there. Now let's pop it up. So that's where it goes. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna take the knuckle off, the lower, then the upper. We'll take the A-arms off. We're gonna undo this brake line right here. And that is a 10 millimeter. We'll start to reassemble the new A-arms. And remember, these A-arms are pre-adjusted, but you have to fine tune them. Everything's zip tied in. I got the grease gun out so we can go ahead and grease everything and we should be good to go. So let's go ahead and get this done. Lower arm. Pop right off. And there's our upper arm. So let's go ahead, let's take a quick look at where we're at, and then we'll reassemble this side. So here is the lower, so you can see, and I can tell you this lower looks really stout, but compared to this one's much heavier, and you can definitely tell this is a thicker tubing. And when we look over here, let's flip this one around, it's the same way. And this is what I was talking about earlier. I mean, look at that versus two little tabs. Now back here, if you're gonna change your shocks, this is a great time. There's your sway bar as it goes up in there. So an interesting note that I noticed on here is on the rear, it was just the bolts. There's my lower bolt, there's my upper bolt. But on the front, they come with a washer. Then here's my lower bolt, my upper bolt for the knuckle. So if I can look in there, I can see I still got good brake pad on both sides. Get in there and look. So now let's go ahead, let's get the A-arms reassembled. Remember, I'm not gonna torque down the lower A-arm right now. I wanna get both sides done. Put it on the ground, put some weight on it. Just roll it back and forth just a few feet to see if I need to adjust the adjustments that Super ATV did. We're gonna get that camber to be nice and square so that we're not wearing the outside edge of our tires. So let's go ahead and reassemble. Now, while you're here, if you ever want to check to see if your axle's binding, you can sit here and I can rotate it. Now I'm in neutral. My front wheels are chocked, for those of you wondering. My shock is not hooked up. So let's let this thing go down to full droop. I mean, it's as far as it goes. And that's binding. I can't, if you notice when I do it, it lifts up. Watch it one more time. So that's that full droop and your axle's binding. Let's go ahead and put the shock back in and see if it's still binding at full droop with the shock. So if you see, I am probably an inch away from getting that lined up. So hopefully we're not binding at full droop. Okay, let's try this full droop again. We're all the way down. And we are just barely out of the bind zone, but we are not binding. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead. I'm going to torque the bolts down. I'm going to grease the upper and lower A-arms right now. And then I'm gonna do the other side and I'll come back to you. Disassembly and reassembly is identical. Let's do it in reverse order. On a scale of 1 to 10, this job's probably a 3. Take your patience. You can do everything with some basic hand tools. You need a couple of box end wrenches and a ratchet with basically a metric ratchet set. All right, everyone, I want to give you a quick update of where I'm at. I'm in the reassembly process. So I've already got the A-arms on. I have them torqued down to manufacturer specs. Remember, the insides are a higher spec than the outsides on the knuckles. I did not replace the nuts like I'm supposed to. I'm going to order those today, and then I will replace them here in the future. So this bolt right here has some corrosion. This is the shock bolt. It's the only bolt I found with corrosion. So I'm going to go ahead and order a new bolts for both sides and nuts. I was going to go down to Ace, but it's a few dollars online. So let me give you some tips. When you get this in, leave your sway bar off and pull your shock up. That way, if I leave the sway bar off and the shock up, you can get in here to do your adjustments. What I did is I took my small jack stand right here and I put the shock on. I just hand threaded the bolt. I set it down on the wheel spacers here. I took a level and figured out that I needed to do 3 turns on both sides out to bring the camber so it sits almost flush or vertical, straight up and down. Now, I didn't take all of the camber out, and the reason being is these are the load leveling shocks, but I'm eventually going to change these. And when I get my kids back there or I put a load, I don't want too much negative camber. I want it to sit almost perfect. So remember, you got your caster, which is forward and backwards. You got your toe, which is in and out, and you can adjust the toe with these. I wouldn't recommend too much. And then you've got your camber, which is how the tire sits like this. And mine were sitting way positive camber, so I brought them almost to vertical. So makes it easy to get the shocks in and out like this. If you got your sway bar on, you're not gonna be able to pull those bottom bolts off to adjust it. Another tip is grease the snot out of this thing before you go ahead and assemble it. I assembled the top A-arm on the other side and the bottom A-arm. I ended up taking them back off when I turned the video off just to get them greased, because it's very hard to get the grease gun in there. I wanted to make sure it was greased all the way around those bushings. It's a very tight fitting. There's actually one of the grease zerks over there broke off and I tried to grease it the second time. So I'll order a new one of those. There's a few cents each. Other than that, reassembly is really easy. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to get my sway arms, the sway bar on first, because that's the hardest part. And then I'm going to go ahead and get the shock on each side. I will put the wheels and tires back on. take it for a quick spin to get the suspension to settle, and we will see where we're at right there. So I'll be right back. Okay, and that's it. That's the whole install. It's super easy, guys. To do this install, you literally need just hand tools. You need a 14mm and a 17mm wrench. Make sure it's not an adjustable, actually get a wrench. And then you need a socket in the same sizes. You're going to need a torque wrench to torque everything down to factory specs. Get that owner's manual like I said. You're also going to need an M5 hex head to do the sway bar. And then something to take the wheels and tires off. Other than that, it's super simple. This whole process took me about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Plan 3 hours. Do everything right. Don't cut corners. I mean, these things at high speeds are putting your lives on the line. Make sure you chock the wheels, you block the tires, jack stands. But if you go ahead and look at it right now, definitely more clearance under there with the arched A-arms. I'm not worried about the rear axles binding by any means. I did spin the axles with the shocks in at full droop. I may need to adjust the camber a little bit more. 3 turns may not be enough, maybe 1 or 2 more turns. We can do that in the future. Make sure you grease all the joints before you do the install. It makes your life a world of easier. Other than the 14 and the 17mm, you need a small, I think it was an 11mm for the brake line. And then you are going to need a big crescent wrench for the jam nuts. Don't forget to tighten the jam nuts on the bottom there for the A-arms to adjust the camber. Other than that, some good synthetic grease is what I used. Have fun. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think. Super easy install. Anybody can do it as long as you got the right tools. Take your time and be safe. Don't forget to give me a big thumbs up if you like the video. And don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.